Taran. Welcome to the Caffeine and Carrots session.
Hi, Rohan.
I'm
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time out. For everyone watching, Taran is the Senior Vice President, Client Experience, Product and Business Operations with Leoforce. Uh, Taran, if you could add on a little bit more about yourself and your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm excited to be here. So thank you for selecting me to be part of this conversation with you. So my history, I have a lot of experience at a variety of organizations, agnostic of industry, and really the thread that really continues throughout those is really focusing on software and technology, building brand and employee experiences, operational efficiencies, and really building rapport and relationships. So that's really what has continued to be a thread throughout my my background, and particularly here, that's very much leveraged at Leoforce.
Thank you for sharing that. And as we've been speaking, for the last couple of conversations on, the importance of, customer success operations in SaaS organizations, and I know there as in your varying experiences across industries, you've probably picked up on bits and pieces that have probably helped you shape up, stitching the entire journey together for a customer across functions, across within the organization. And so, to start this off on this topic, why do you think a CS ops is important for a SaaS organization?
Ultimately, we are the touchstone with the clients post-sale, right? So there's a lot of insights that this particular role can bring to the organization and help support business decisions. So it's really important that not only do we project the voice of the customer within our role, but we're also understanding the relationship that a customer has with our organization and the various touch points that they have with us. And in doing so, that is where you can really stitch together, as you said, an experience from start to finish. Unfortunately, sometimes we do have to offboard. And then that's really ultimately focused on satisfaction of their experience, of the product, and our services.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. And so, continuing that same chain of thought, do you think there is a good time for an organization to invest in, putting together CS operations, putting up the functions and the processes in place? And I'll follow up to that before you respond is, does it change or vary depending on the size of organization or the industry, the timing of setting it up?
So definitely I see that as a two-part question, and short answer for the second one is yes, it does change, but we'll get to that part. But setting it up, ultimately, I think you first have to understand your product and understand who it is that you're trying to sell to, what is their need, and understanding their ongoing need with your service. Is it very much a self-sufficient service and you're passing that along? Or is it something that needs continuous support and or expansion? If there are those types of opportunities, that should be something you're thinking about at those very early stages. Actually standing something up as far as this department does not have to happen in those first few months, but it should be something that you're considering and thinking about and starting to put a plan in place to bring that that function into the fold. So timing is going to be based off of your current growth and your projected growth, and ultimately seeing your current team's bandwidth. And do you have the right skills in place to support what a CS role or a department like this would require? So it's being observant of those moments in time and being aware and ready to pull that department into the fold.
Yeah, and I think
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
As far as scaling, it is very much the same. So ultimately, as you're observing your projected growth over those next several months, several years, that is where you can start to predict and start to outline what does your function look like? Do we need to bring on more people? Do we want to keep our services limited per client success manager, for instance, limit how many clients they carry to support the service level that you want to provide, and so forth. So all of those things, as you continue to grow, you begin to have data behind it versus early on where you have expectations. And so by leveraging both expectations and now data, you can provide more of a roadmap for that scaling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we've, I've seen this, I've had a similar experience, working with organizations of different sizes as well. One thing common though is the need for them to understand, their customer's journey better. And without CS ops, there's no focused effort on it. And so the customers are being touched. There are interactions happening by whoever is available, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's consistent or it's positive in most part. And so you're sort of going with the flow for most part until you actually put in a more structure in place. And so it is important for organizations. And would you agree that startups, especially when they are too small, when they probably still don't have that visibility yet, or they don't have sufficient budget in place, they should probably avoid setting up CS ops too soon?
I would disagree with setting up the opportunity or setting up the program. There's a lot of tools out there that are free. Excel spreadsheets, we use them a lot. So those are very simple tools to start with. So it's really about understanding what is it that customer is going to experience. And I have some templates that I use in Excel that essentially are that first layer of identifying that service blueprint that we're offering as an organization, which is where we're mapping all of the touch points and all of the interactions, both internally and externally. Who's touching them, what tools we're using in that experience, are there any processes or resources available during those touch points, and so forth. And that's all that can be done in an Excel spreadsheet. So it's really about strategy and design on those early stages. And there's plenty of free or very inexpensive tools to help you stand something like this up. I even use Excel spreadsheets for developing our client success playbooks. So all of these resources that you're wanting to build and are building, all of these enablement tools, there could just be PowerPoint slide decks or PDFs or Word documents. Those are, again, a lot of free tools or very inexpensive tools. And by consolidating those into a single space like a playbook, again, it can be done in an Excel spreadsheet real easily, linking those so it's easier to find for your team. There's plenty of things that you can do at a smaller, under a smaller budget.
Yeah, and so you're recommending to start small and then scale as the requirement increases.
I think that's a case by case, but I certainly think that you can start from that smaller scale. Again, it's understanding your projections and your data, whatever data you do have, and realizing how quickly you have the potential to grow, looking at your pipeline and your percentage of close and making those determinations there. But absolutely, you can start small. And just because you do scale up does not mean those tools don't work anymore. So there are still opportunities to continue to use those in conjunction with more engaged and more automated tools. That's like, for instance, why we brought in SmartKarrot is we needed to have more built-in automations to make us more efficient. We'd already created templates. We'd already created the processes, but by bringing in tools like SmartKarrot, I was able to actually create automation. So our team is triggered to send certain things or do certain tasks. So that's how I can envision scaling from the start.
Okay, makes sense. And so when you're setting it up, an organization is setting it up first, who is typically involved? Who should be involved? Are there any key skills that you identify or look for when you're trying to get a resource that can help set up CS ops within the organization? And do you also, in addition to skills, look for any specific background, any education, any training that you think can help in the entire process?
Yeah. So setting up a program, setting up a department, you're going to want to start with somebody who has those strategic, holistic views of your organization and what you're trying to achieve. And then you can continue to build out your team from there. But having somebody in place that can see the big picture, can understand the goals of the organization, has a good understanding of the tool itself, the product itself, and has at least some visibility into the industry and some exposure. Those are all things that are going to help support that initial design. Beyond that, then as you continue to build your team and the more intimate members of your team and those individual contributors, it is very helpful to make sure that they have the sort of those creative thinking skills and solution selling, because really client success still has a lot of effort in negotiations and renewals and upsells and so forth. So being able to really understand the client's needs and provide suggestions based off of their needs about resources or tools or optimizations that you can provide them is really important. Efficiency and organization is really important as well. So those are some of the things that you start to drill into as you build out the team. And so I think it will evolve as the organization grows. But ultimately, as far as standing up that organization, you might have a core person like a head of client success come in, or a director role. And it's really important that that individual works cross-functionally, because ultimately what we talked about before is there's a lot of touch points in that client journey, and we need to build processes that connect all of those. We can't build processes in a silo of once they're in this phase of our relationship, they're going to experience one thing. There's a lot of upstream and downstream interactions that take place. So it's very important that whoever is standing this up is doing so in collaboration with other heads and departments.
Right. And so in their effort of setting up these operation, the program in place, are there defined roles and responsibilities at a high level that you think, that go along with it, just to be sure that they are able to, focus on the objectives or the vision of the organization and have the right, right program in place?
I think it's really important for that individual to have the guardrails around their particular area of focus. But then again, with that collaborative sort of flex in there, right? So by not being too distracted by a variety of other departments or experiences, but being aware and in communication with those is important.
So in an effort of, as you mentioned, having a sort of a guardrail or a guideline in place to make sure that they know what is needed to be done in the steps that are involved in getting there, and putting that together with the their key skills that they potentially need to have. Do they also need to have do they need to be tech savvy, or be aware or know how to utilize all the different tech stack? And that whether it's a startup or a large enterprise, everybody today has a ton of different tools and technologies that they've invested in. And so how important is it for this individual or a team, depending on how it's scaled up, to have understanding of the various tools that the organization has invested in?
Yeah. And thank you, Ryan. I do recall where I was going with that second point that I was going to make, but it was really focused, and it kind of blends into my answer here too, is it's also really important that this individual understands the business objectives of the company, that, the software itself, the organization, where we're trying to go, and how we can project certain KPIs, certain key performance indicators, not only for our clients, but for ourselves. So being able to think about those things from a business perspective and setting goals. So moving that into also the additional skills and the tech savviness, it's important to understand our product and the value it can bring. So if this is specifically talking about a software, the tech savvy level needs to be at least a medium to at least a medium or above, if you will, if you want to give it some sort of a range. But the capability of being able to quickly learn and onboard and retain information, not just what button do I push, but understanding the strategy and the why behind it and how it can impact the customer's experience is very important, especially in a software role.
Right, and I agree with you because even if it's using just the basic stuff that you mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
like getting stuff done on an Excel or a PowerPoint
Mhm.
or a PDF,
Mhm.
converting stuff into it and sending it across.
Mhm.
Whilst these are not too complex today, because you sort of it's become part of your day to day.
Right.
They do require some level of learning for somebody who's just starting off, and so
Mhm.
it is not probably going to work best with
Mhm.
somebody who's trying to figure these things out.
Mhm.
It could work to an extent, like you said, if the person has a capability of creative thinking,
Mhm.
can strategize things, understand or translate the organization goals into how it distills into the function and their
Right.
KPIs and their outcomes and what they need to contribute to. So I think if they're able to do that, they can then expand the team underneath to have some of these expertise or specialities to then go ahead and make sure that it's taken care of. But yes, I think I agree with you that at least a medium ability on the tech stack
Yeah.
would probably be beneficial in actioning some of these, especially while they're single-handedly trying to get to some of these outcomes.
Yeah.
Um, Now, do you think this individual, once as you're starting off, and I'm still keeping in mind that it's you setting up the operation, so you're probably just starting off with one and not an entire team. And
Yeah.
so when you're starting off an individual, uh, who should this person report into? Should you have a dedicated chief customer officer? Should they report into a CRO, a CFO? Because I've seen this aligned to different function heads in different organizations. And
Mhm.
so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the individual coming in, like that head of client success, for example, and the individual who's going to be standing that up, I've seen and have experienced personally different reports. So directly to the CEO,
Mhm.
making sure that we have that vivid vision clearly understood, and that can be translated then in how we onboard clients and the types of materials that we present and how it's presented. All of those things go into that. So by being very close to the CEO, whether it's a direct report or a dotted line, I think is incredibly important for this function. Especially, this is ultimately how it plays out, right? So that's a very important one. Directly related to reporting to the CRO, there is a revenue element to this role as well. While it's more focused on retention and possible upsells, there is still it still continues to be a process that flows from the sales cycle into that ongoing success. So are we presenting the information correctly up front? Are we setting clear expectations? So definitely the CRO can be that role, that report. If this is the first client success role, this would be an individual who could step into that C-suite spot and continue to develop their leadership team underneath that.
Right. No, and that's a great point. And one of the things that you mentioned there on reporting into CRO in some cases where it's a continuation, right, of the journey that you have prospects converting into clients, and so you have that extension of the journey, and it goes beyond that. And so, do you think CS Ops it makes sense to have this more as across functions rather than restrictive it to just one function called customer success? If you're able to extend it pan organization to sales, to marketing, to product, and the other functions as well.
Yeah. And that's really what how I've evolved this role here at Leoforce, and have graduated the title from client success to client experience. And so really what I'm talking about in that regard is the entire experience and every touch point that that client or prospect has with our organization. So I am now very engaged with our marketing team, with our sales team, with our client success team. I'm also very involved with our product. So everything that our client experiences, I'm even involved with our finance team. They're definitely leading, their tasks, but how are we messaging them around the billing cycle or some overdue invoices? those are all touch points that a client will have with your organization. And if you're not at least aware of the types of communication, how it's being communicated, and if it's not carrying the same tone that you're trying to set as an organization, then we're dropping the ball somewhere. So it's very important, I think, that whoever does lead that charge does have a very holistic view and can integrate across the organization and work collaboratively with others.
Right. And so if you can expand a little bit more on that in terms of what you've personally experienced. And I know when we first interacted, you were director client success. And so you slowly started adding on one function at a time, and you've expanded your role and it's evolved. And so what has been your, core focus as you've been, as you've got exposure to all these different functions and accessibility to it? Because a lot of times, whilst theoretically you know all of these stuff, it is practically difficult because you don't necessarily have the ability to make the required changes or influence the required changes in all the different functions that could cohesively work together as one unit. So what has been your experience?
Yeah. So graduating into where I am now, I absolutely do. It's important that you have that support across your leadership team as well. So I actually do have quite a bit of influence in this current role to encourage change and highlight the value of that change. They might not all be my direct reports, but there is value placed on this role and the value that it brings to the conversation. So thinking about how, where I started, it's incredibly important for whoever comes into a CS role, whether it's somebody who's going to be standing up a group or if it's an individual contributor. It's first and foremost important to, one, understand the vision of the organization, and number two, the product itself.
Right.
Everything stems from that. So first of all, it's about learning the product. And I did a deep dive. I got on calls with engineers and sat through hours of training, deep dive training, not client onboarding training or sales demos. This was talking with our engineers and our data science team to really understand what the information was behind the scenes, why it functioned the way it did. So now I also know our limitations, our capabilities, and I can now design enablement tools and training materials for my team and for our customers that are cohesive and comprehensive to all of that information. So first and foremost, it's understanding the product and the purpose. And then it's about creating all of those enablement materials. So focusing on the product first and then designing an experience around, what do we actually want our customers to know and feel, and how much time do we want to spend with them? And in that process, then designing who do we need to have in those seats then? What are the skills that are required to service that type of experience? So then you start to identify the skills and the needs of the individual contributors on your team and who you would need as team managers and team leaders. And you start to identify the right those right elements to actually service the journey that you've designed based off of the vivid vision and the product itself. So it really comes around, and ultimately what ended up happening is just being very much involved with the product and being that voice of the customer and creating that feedback loop. So now we're hearing more from our customers. We're relaying that to our product team. We're sending that upstream to our marketing team and our sales team. We're identifying clients that are successful and why are they successful? What are some of the trending elements to either their geography or their whatever the element could be, and making sure that information that we are able to capture and those insights are distributed to the right parts of the organization. And so by being that conduit and establishing myself as that conduit, and then developing team members to emulate that, and are continuing to build that. I've built a very beautiful, successful team, and from that have come additional managers and additional leaders from that. So by setting the stage for expectations of and plan for growth, plan for understanding of, what do we need to do first to understand and then serve.
Yeah, and I think in this effort of bringing in all of the functions together, it also becomes a key part of your role, and then also probably by extension, all the folks who are associated to, keep cutting the noise out, because
Mhm.
you have so much feedback and so many inputs that you get from various stakeholders. And while
Yeah.
some of them are important, some of them are the ones that you want to cut out in an
Mhm.
effort to make sure you're able to focus and prioritize. And so I think that is also a good skill to have, to know what to pick up and what to leave out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
One key thing I think that I think every organization has on top of mind, that I'm sure you all did as well, and I'm sure we do as well, is budget. And so, that's where you think about, budget for acquiring different tools, right? So every time you want to think of it, whether it's a simplistic thing of an Excel or a PowerPoint, now you need an MS Office suite, right? Now
Mhm.
you think of a customer support tool. There's another investment there. A customer success platform. Now that's another investment. So there's investment or budget that you need to have allocated for, tools per se, and then there is also budget that you need for people or resources that you need to have using these tools and putting the processes in place and getting all of the outcomes achieved. So what is your take on, organizations start to large? If it's a small organization, how do you think they should go about it? Or if it's a larger organization that has significantly larger amount of revenue, do you think it's a percentage of the revenue, or how would they go about allocating a budget to this?
Yeah. So I have an entrepreneurial spirit. I've been an entrepreneur myself, so I'm very frugal. So I don't spend money just to have the newest tool. So I'm very thoughtful about why we would purchase any sort of new tool, how it would actually impact our experience internally, what sort of value can it bring to the rest of the organization. So I really focus on building basically my own case study for why would I want to bring this tool in. Some of the things that I really focus on are understanding, one, the client journey that we've designed and our expectations there. How much time does an individual client success manager need to spend based off of that standard roadmap? Right. So how many hours would that look like? What do they need to do during that time frame? And then that's when I start to put together those expectations for how many clients a particular client success manager should own before we need to bring on another client success manager. So those are all data points that you start running formulas and you see within your organization how much time is being spent on certain tasks. And in fact, I like to run time studies. They're not the most exciting thing. But for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I would ask my team, or if it's just me at the time, I would check my own time and understand, where am I spending every minute of my day? And it's not ongoing. It's not an ongoing timesheet, but it is informative, and it really gives you some insight into if you're overspending time on a smaller deal, if you are underspending time on a larger deal that needs more handholding, needs more nurturing. If you're spending a lot of time on monotonous tasks internally or side projects. So it's a really great way to identify these, get a lot of information, start to splice it and dice it and see these trends. And then that's when you can say, okay, there's some efficiency gains here. If we can automate some of these things that seem to be taking away from our customer success or client success time with the client or on these priority projects. So I think time studies are incredibly valuable. They give you a lot of insight and can give you some clear direction then on where maybe I should spend some money. Also understanding where you have gaps. You have some blind spots, especially early on. If you're not tracking a lot of data, or you don't quite know, you don't have clients that have gone through a full cycle yet. So there's missing data there. So when you have those blind spots, it is important to understand if there are tools that can provide those blind spots, or if it's just about leveraging more of the tool itself and optimizing it to expose those blind spots to you. So those are other areas too, where not just for myself, but is there a blind spot that this would serve the organization to help make business decisions or help to prioritize our product enhancements or roadmap. So those are all things that I would look at and consider along with budget and just general state of the union before making any tool decisions.
Okay. And just a sort of a wrap-up question, around, something that we've also discussed earlier on, not just setting up the program or operations in an organization, but to, evaluate or reevaluate it once, every 6 months or every year, to just try and see what's working, what's not working, and ensure that there's, continuous improvement that goes on, to just make sure that you're getting the best value out of the program for the organization. And I know you've had this lean philosophy, and in putting that in place in Leoforce as well. So maybe if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a part I really enjoy. But ultimately we've designed this roadmap, right? You've gone through those early stages where you've identified how you want somebody to interact with your business and the ideal experience that you want to provide them. So you start from there. And I like to put structure around it so that individuals from within the organization feel like they have a process to follow.
Yeah.
But I do encourage that flexibility, that bend. And if we immediately see that something isn't working or there's another great idea around the corner, then let's go ahead and implement it and try it. But ultimately, I'd like to set a stage, and then it gives everybody an opportunity and some time to experience it, kick the tires, if you will, and really understand what's working and what's not. And that's when I start to roll into a retrospective. So we probably about once a year, actually, we are doing a retrospective on our current roadmap. And we go through that process with both of our clients as well as our client success managers. And we are identifying at every stage of that roadmap what's working, what's not, what are we learning, what can we tweak, and what is the general sentiment, both of the client during that point in time, as well as yourself during that point in time. Are you getting frustrated and annoyed? Is the client really happy? What are the things? And then as evaluating that information, then you can start to design maybe some tweaks on your internal process so it's not so frustrating for the client success manager. Maybe that's why we need to bring in that automation tool so that we can relieve some of that strain. So we go through the roadmap and then design some edits basically to that, and then continue that process. So absolutely continuous improvement, ongoing development. And I think that's key, and that's part of that scaling and that growth opportunity as well.
Yeah, I love that, because we also work on the same philosophy and have the same belief that you can't build Rome in a day, right? And it has to be a process. It has to be done incrementally, because you don't want to go all in without knowing if it's going to work or not. And so you build the framework, or you build the base for it. You evaluate and see, after giving it some time, to see if it's in the direction that you want it to be built on, and then continue building on it. And there's of course the whole point on you trying to make sure that you remove the pieces that aren't working, replacing it with better options or better pieces in there, and make sure you have a structurally a strong structure built out over a period of time.
Right.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Taran, for sharing your thoughts. And I'm sure the viewers would appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time out.
Of course. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you.